Stakeholder.
In gambling, an independent party with whom each of those who make a wager deposits the money or counters wager.
A person with an interest or concern in something, especially a business.
In emergency management, any person or entity with a vested interest in the survival and recovery of a given community. You.
Welcome to Stakeholder Prepping.
Welcome back to Stakeholder Prepping, where you are the stakeholder in your own survival. We are your hosts. My name is Chris.
And I'm AC. And in this episode, we're going to explore the psychological and social toll of being prepared. And we're going to talk about some ways to deal with friends and family who maybe just don't get it. People that aren't preppers or maybe think that it's weird or maybe call you crazy. We're going to give you a couple of comebacks to deal with those kinds of people.
Would you argue that this is the tinfoil hat clapback episode?
I think it is the tinfoil hat clapback episode. We are going to snap some tinfoil hats back with this one. Yeah.
There we go. I like it. And I do think you're right, AC. This is a topic that's a lot of the time ignored in pop culture portrayals of prepping. I mean, if you even going back to like I Am Legend with Will Smith, we didn't see the part of the movie where he was, stocking up on ammunition and booby trapping his house and going to the dealership for that brand new Mustang that he was driving around the streets. We never saw any of that. We only saw the part where he needed all of those preps and they still weren't enough. It's the same with Tremors and Burt Gummer.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody ever talked about it. He was always the crazy guy.
Until you broke into the wrong goddamn rec room.
Exactly. Yes. So why is it such a problem? So really what we're looking at in this episode is we want to explore how being prepared can offer this immense psychological benefit, but that kind of path to prepper nirvana, if you will, it's oftentimes just littered with mental and social challenges. So in this episode, we want to go over those psychological challenges and then give you some ammunition on how to deal with people who want to belittle your prepper mindset.
And when you say ammunition, are you talking 30 carbine or?
I mean, if that fits the bill, I personally was thinking like 30 millimeter, but whatever works, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that was a double entendre, but no, we're really talking about giving you some counter arguments and talking points for those non-preppers, those naysayers in your life.
I like it. So, yeah, let's talk about the social cost first and then break that down a little. People often fear being seen as that guy, and I'm using quotation fingers right now. Like, no one wants to be seen as that guy when they talk about, their preps for potential emergencies or disasters. This is that phenomenon, and it has some very real social implications. Having discussions about extensive preparations might highlight a significant difference in priorities or worldviews between different people and their social circles. And this can potentially lead to a sense of disconnect or alienation. Not alienation. Did you see Alien Nation? Like the 80s sci-fi movie?
I think so.
Oh, you got to check that one out. It actually is kind of a very weird, like, James Caan is this police detective, and then the guy who plays the alien, his alien police partner, is Mandy Patinkin. The guy who was like Saul Berenson in...
He was the Spaniard in The Princess Bride. Was Mandy Patinkin.
Yeah, that's right. I was going to say he was Gideon in Criminal Minds, I think, but he was in Homeland. He was the guy in Homeland. Anyway, it's a story about 300,000 aliens like show up in the desert and then they all integrate into society, and there's like a lot of discrimination and stuff, and then they all get drunk on spoiled milk. But anyway,
I think one of my favorite alien shows is Resident Alien with Alan Tudyk.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
It's hilarious to me, and just he can bring any character to life and just give it so much more depth than you were expecting. It's a great show if you haven't seen it.
I think there's a lot of those sci-fi alien movies that really can be seen as prepper movies, not just from the, shoot 'em up tactical standpoint, but more for like that us versus them mentality. You know what I mean?
District 9, I could see that applying to District 9,
Yeah,
but certainly to Falling Skies.
sure. That's another great example,
Noah Wiley in it,
right?
from ER.
Yeah, from ER back. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's a great series for kind of the alien invasion aspect of prepping.
right.
There's tons of different material out there and entertainment for, is it a bioweapon? Okay, that's going to be your shows like Contagion or The Last Ship. Is it an
Oh,
alien
sure.
invasion? Is it the the end of the world because of tectonic activity? Like what's going on? There's all kinds of information out there. I think the general idea is there's so much going on. It's so easy to get inundated. If you're prepared for everything, yeah, you do look like that tinfoil hat guy because you're constantly on the lookout for what is that next threat. You are a risk matrix master.
Right, you're a walking risk matrix. That's exactly right. So if we can get back on topic, I'm talking about, yes, being alienated as a prepper. And I know most of the people listening have had something like this sort of happen to them. I know I certainly have. And then there's that fear of being labeled, right? There's this concern about being labeled as an overly paranoid, alarmist, extremist, tinfoil hat wearing person. And that leads to the social discomfort, and it potentially can impact some of your interpersonal relationships.
I absolutely can. I think, and this is where it gets kind of tricky because we stay as not anti, but apolitical and a-religious and just try to give you hard set facts,
Right.
historical facts, things like that.
Yeah, and speaking of historical facts, I mean, think about like the Tunguska event, or I don't know, the Yellowstone supervolcano. I don't know which way it voted in the last election, but I don't think it's very political. It doesn't have to be.
Exactly, but so many times it just turns into this political debate. If you are a prepper, then you must be on this side of the aisle. You must
Right.
have these views. You must have this opinion of
Right.
me.
Right.
That's that's really not the case at all. It's I want to be prepared to adapt and overcome so that I can get home to my family, so that I can protect my family, so that we can just go about our lives in our little la-di-da fantasy land because hey, we chose not to participate in the apocalypse.
Absolutely. And it is, you talk to friends and about just preparedness, and it can get uncomfortable super fast. I think there's just a lot of different reasons for that, but people who don't share that prepper mindset often see preparedness as paranoia or just some weird unhealthy fixation, and this can lead to that awkward conversation. It can lead to the ridicule and that feeling of being judged or alienated by people that are close to you. So yeah, those things can happen just because you are a prepper, and people you're talking to don't really understand what that means to you.
And you're talking about just people not understanding your motives, your interpretation of events. It goes the other way too. So there is a liability mindset common with preppers that, when somebody who is prepping, when they look at others through that lens of a potential disaster, they may begin to see kind of that liability for all of those non-preppers. Or, yeah, you can join the team as cannon fodder. Well, that's not really productive. So it does erode trust in relationships. It makes it difficult to form those new meaningful social connections outside of the prepping community. That's why the gummers were so secluded, is they didn't have anybody to talk to share that experience or what their mindset or their mentality was.
Right? Because you don't want to disclose your preps to people. That's just normal. And I think, and again, not to get too political, but I know a lot of people are scared of things like there's red flag laws now. Like if you're the guy that everybody knows has a billion guns and you get into a completely civil argument with someone, there is a potential that they can just simply contact the authorities and say, "Hey, I think Chris is angry and he owns a bunch of guns. So you naturally, as a prepper, you kind of seclude yourself. It is kind of this taboo. There is a bit of secrecy. I remember personally going to this was probably maybe 10 years ago. It was one of the last times there was this very big push to uh, have a lot more gun control in the United States, and going to my father-in-law's house, and he had just said something off the cuff about, "Oh, hey, see, do you have one of those assault rifles?" Like, just like that. And I'm like, I don't know. I saw your assault Subaru Forester parked in the driveway, Dwayne. Like, people like, just it's just funny. Like, you're not even. I'm not like this open prepper with everybody, but yeah, there's certainly a cost to that secrecy, right? You just sort of you kind of clam up when people start talking about things like that.
Yeah, and it's happened to me too. Somebody broke down on the side of the road, and I went to go try to help him out, pulled the tow straps out of the truck and hooked him up. And everyone who drove by, you could just see their jaws drop. And some of them were coworkers that were driving by. It's like, well, gee, thanks for that help.
Yeah,
But,
you're the guy with the toe straps. You're the prepared guy. You're the prepared friend.
and I got kind of ridiculed for it when I made it back into that shop because, oh, what are you doing? Why do you have all that? Well, if I get stuck on the fucking side of the road in a ditch, I want to be able to recover. So
Right.
I can do it for somebody else too.
Prepare to self-rescue.
Apparently not them because they made fun of me for it. So
But there's yeah, who's the one with toe straps now? But there's there's that. I think there's a lot of fear of the people are going to show up when things get bad. If you tell people that you are prepared, they are going to mock and ridicule. But as soon as something happens, they're going to knock on your door because they know that you are prepared. And I personally don't know if that's true or not. I think about all of my friends, my very close inner circle. I think they would. They're like, oh, yeah, you're the prepared guy. We know what's up. We're going to bring our skills and we're going to bring our supplies. We're coming to your place. But I think it may be a little more unfounded that I just think everybody's going to, show up to my house. But there's also the theft aspect, right? If people think that you're just crazy prepared and you've got a safe full of guns and gold, then you can be putting a target on yourself, right?
you really can. And if you tell somebody that you have a bunch of guns and they kind of jokingly, well, I know where I'm going in the apocalypse,
Right.
that's kind of red flag number one, just in the back of your mind. But prepping is so much more than just guns and ammo. I mean,
Exactly.
I may have all of the guns for my group and none of the food. So what are you going to do? Just eat bullets? That's going to be one super tasty last meal.
They do. Wait, but yeah, we always go to the guns, right? People always go to the guns. Oh, you're a prepper, so you must have a billion guns. And I mean, maybe that's true, but still, that's not that's not the bulk of it. I'm not worried about using my guns. I'm worried about not dying because I get dysentery because I don't know what to do with my poop.
Exactly. And I really do think this is one of the biggest reasons that we have had such a hard time and a challenge growing this podcast is we hear from listeners about, how much they like our content, or we simply ask them to share the podcast and we usually get kind of like pushback there. It's, well, I don't want to. I don't really feel like sharing something that I like because I'll be seen as the crazy one. No, not necessarily.
That's nuts. And I think you're totally right. It's crazy to think about that, but I completely get it. If you recommend a podcast with prepping in the name, there's the potential for people to automatically think that you have a safe full of guns and a basement full of beans and rice. It's nuts to think about that you're right. If you simply say, "Hey, here's this podcast I listen to. I think you'd enjoy it." You don't know what people are going to think of you simply because you recommended a podcast like ours to them.
And that actually does make me think about um, like an actual medical diagnosis. It's called rejection sensitive dysphoria, or RSD. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, AC.
No.
It was first described and kind of popularized by a psychiatrist. His name was Dr. William W. Dodson. He was a psychiatrist who specialized in treatment of ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. But
Hmm.
rejection sensitive dysphoria, or RSD for short, is this heightened sensitivity to social rejection or criticism. And it can lead to these episodes of super intense emotional distress, even in response to perceived or imagined rejection. So, individuals with RSD, they can build up something so much in their head that they actually start to suffer anxiety before they even take action. And anybody who has RSD might avoid honesty to prevent that emotional pain or that ostracism. They're not going to say that they like something because it has some type of stigma with it. And there's
Wow.
nothing wrong with it.
Right. Wow, that's crazy.
And let's not forget, there is a dark side to this. So there certainly are things you can take too far. And I want to call out those kind of elephants in the room to help people avoid those things. So, on the one hand, prepper's mindset is often a direct result of anxiety from the end of the world as we know it, or the apocalypse, or what happens if, what happens if, what happens if. You can very quickly overwhelm yourself with anxiety. The act of prepping can provide this tangible way for you to manage fear and uncertainty. So, by taking control of those variables that you can, you feel this sense of empowerment and kind of a reduction in your general baseline anxiety level. So that's the positive side of the coin. But for some, that anxiety can be a double edged sword. And I kind of want to talk about a few of the common psychological pitfalls that you can really drop into.
Sure.
So you can find yourself in a cycle of fear driven behavior. So that is the drive to prepare for what can happen. It becomes a compulsion. Same as bulk buying or hoarding, things like that. It becomes part of your personality and it becomes very, very difficult to separate from or detach from. And it's fueled by this constant preoccupation with potential disaster. So it can lead to cycles of perpetual anxiety where you're never ready enough, and you can actually box yourself out and find yourself constantly checking for threats. You become hyper aware of your surroundings, hyper aware of the political landscape, of the religious landscape, what is changing. Um, and it can just become this weight on your shoulders you can never get rid of. So if you're constantly monitoring the news for signs of trouble, especially if it's in an area that's not yours, or if you're obsessively planning for scenarios that are super highly improbable, it's good to be prepared for aliens or the graboids from Tremors, but the odds of that actually happening kind of have to balance out. And I say this all the time to the people I work with: progress, not perfection. If you pursue perfection, you're going to burn out, because the desire to be perfectly prepared, it can lead to financial strain, and that's going to burn you out faster than anything else. And it can be seen truly in people that spend money they don't have, or their prep list becomes so overwhelming you can't move it, and it just becomes a source of more stress instead of stress relief.
Like, don't let good be the enemy of perfect, right?
Progress over perfection. If you
Yep.
can be 1% better today than you were yesterday, you win.
Yeah. That's actually a really good point.
There is also one other psychological aspect, and it's kind of the loss of the present moment. So if your mind is always on a potential future crisis, even if there are no warning signs for it, it becomes very difficult to enjoy the present. So relationships, work, personal hobbies, all of those can be overshadowed by this constant sense of dread. And it can prevent a person from being fully engaged in their day to day life, to which they kind of lose sight of what they're prepping for, because that's kind of the standard of living that they want to keep.
Man, I Totally get that.
This is it. When you talk about psychology, you start down a rabbit hole and it just goes and goes and goes.
Yeah, I completely get everything you just said, and I would say that I'm definitely some amount guilty of all of those things, even if it is just in the back of my mind. I definitely am guilty of thinking that way sometimes, and I'm sure most preppers have experienced some level of that in their lives. So, what are some of the things we can do to avoid being a case study in Dr. Dodson's next book? One, I'm going to say don't be crazy. Like, just seriously, like, you guys, anybody listening, you're all preppers. If there's something that you're doing that you think is crazy, it it's probably crazy. Like, if you're planning to, I don't know, if you're painting your whole roof blue and burying a bunch of school buses, then don't. You're being crazy.
Was that a reference to Blast from the Past and Christopher Walken's walk-ins full of warm Dr. Pepper?
That was actually my Alex Jones, but that's a great, yes, that's awesome. Wait, was it a school bus? Did Christopher Walken? It wasn't a school bus, was it? Was it a buried school bus?
No, it wasn't. They had a full-on
It
bunker.
was like a real bomb shelter bunker thing in that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It was the Alex Jones and the school buses. I remember that.
Yeah, but he was crazy, but he was right in that movie. So yeah, you can be crazy and right sometimes, but that's a very tiny sliver of the Venn diagram we're talking about. Um, some other things you can do to not ostracize yourself. This is where you start sort of vetting the people in your life. Strategic sharing. This is something that just careful consideration of who you share information with and how to share it. This is very crucial. And you think about, like you just said, Chris, that you're helping somebody out of a ditch, and you really start thinking about how much do I want to share with these people? I want to help this person out of the ditch. So maybe I'm simply going to tell them that I have a tow strap, not that I have 4 weeks worth of food in my car and, enough ammunition to start World War III. So strategic sharing is huge. Another one, and this really does help, is just finding common ground with people in those circles. Is focus on the practical and the relatable aspects of prepping. Just like you said, like, I've just got a toe strap in my truck. Like, that's normal. You should too. Basic first aid is one. Anybody can kind of get behind the idea of being prepared for basic first aid. Think about our episode on combat trauma with Charlie. Everyone in the world who doesn't live in an inflatable bubble can take something useful away from that episode.
Oh, 100%.
It's prepping, but it really is extremely practical, and it should be extremely practical to everyone. And then I would say seeking like-minded individuals. So finding communities or groups who share those similar interests in preparedness, they can offer a lot of support and that sense of self-belonging, things like that. So who do you tell? Let's break it down into two circles. There's your inner circle. That's your spouse, your kids, your parents. This is where it's high stakes. You can't just drop the casual joke about the apocalypse with your wife if you've never done that before and expect it to go well.
I'm going to caveat that entirely depends on their sense of humor because we joke about it all the time.
Yeah, that's true, but she also knows that you are prepared, and she already subscribes to that mindset. If this is the first time you're having the conversation, then you have to tiptoe around it a little bit.
That's true. I will say one of our first conversations ever as we were getting to know each other was all about the zombie apocalypse. So I got that going for me.
Nice.
She's
Good
a
on you.
baddie.
Right.
But you're right. The key is don't scare them. Don't try to oversell it with fear. You frame it kind of as insurance. And yeah, it is boring being responsible with your chores, like repaving the driveway or getting a new roof. Hey, honey, I was just thinking about making sure we're covered for a potential emergency, just in case. It's not, I want to spend our entire retirement account on 2 dune buggies and a bus that we're going to bury under the backyard.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then you get into the outer circle, and that's a different story. That's your friends, that's the coworkers, that's the acquaintances. This is pure risk assessment at this point. If you tell them about your preps, you gain their trust for a little while, and then shit hits the fan, and you may have a line of people at the front door that you didn't plan for.
Yeah, and this is where your dark humor comes in, because the person that you played golf with once a month for 5 years is suddenly your best friend, and they brought their entire family.
Yeah, exactly. You need to learn that, how to subtly vet those people. Ask them, hey, what do you do in a blackout? See if they've ever had to change a tire themselves. These answers, they'll tell you everything you need to know about their capacity for self-sufficiency. I always do the pocket knife check. Like, if you're somebody that carries a pocket knife, you are 90% more prepared than anybody else. You just are. I always kind of do that. If you're the guy carrying a pocket knife, you have some appreciation for self-sufficiency. So you don't need to convert the entire world. You just need to build that small group, that, dedicated group of people who you can share your mindset and have those skills that complement yours. It's not about how many guns they have. It's about what they can do or what they can bring to the table. You're not talking about, I've got 10,000 rounds of ammunition. Do you have 10,000 rounds of ammunition? Because that's the only thing that's important. We're talking about that guy who's the retired plumber, the lady who's the master gardener, the neighbor who's an EMT. These are those people who you want on your team. It's kind of like forming a business partnership. Everybody brings this different asset to the table.
Yeah, and it's not like you're saying, as soon as you tell somebody this, hey, let's go out to this family compound where, we've got a militia out there and it's 55 people out in the middle of the back range of Utah, and
Mm-hmm.
anybody who comes on our property is going to get shot.
Right.
You're going to have problems well before shit hits the fan if that's the case. But I guess what happens when you are caught? What happens when you do get busted, when you let it slip that you can completely disassemble and reassemble a Browning Ma Deuce with the correct headspace and timing, completely blindfolded in 20 seconds, and that person just stares at you with their mouth on the floor like you're a complete psychopath, and then they start asking questions. They call you crazy. I mean, how do you mitigate or navigate that?
Yeah, exactly. So can you rip down a Ma Deuce and put it back together blindfolded?
Not in 20 seconds, not anymore.
Yeah, but it's headspace and timing. I've always heard that's the important thing about the M2, headspace and timing.
Headspace and timing is critical if you want it to function well. Otherwise, you're going to get one shot, charge, and it just slows down the whole machine gun aspect of the machine gun.
Right. So, yeah, you're right. People may call you crazy. So that's the "you're crazy" argument. So here's a handful of comebacks and arguments and counterpoints, and let's talk about them. This is psychology of the argument we're talking about here, and I really actually enjoyed that in college. I took a handful of psychology classes, and not quite enough to get a minor, but I took a bunch, and I really enjoyed that whole psychology of the argument. So let's talk about that. There's something called the turn it around comeback, and these responses kind of pivot the conversation back to that person's lack of preparation and exposes their own vulnerability. I really like that one. So if somebody calls you crazy, you just say, I call it risk management. You call it hoping for the best. I really like responses like that.
I like that one. It's super simple, clean, and cuts to the bone.
It's simple, and it's not super snarky. It's just how a lot of people think. You can go with the only thing crazy is assuming the grocery store will always be there. That's a good one.
Yeah, I can absolutely get behind that one too.
Right? Or the I'd rather be a crazy prepper than a panicked victim. That's a little more in your face, but I think that's true for a lot of us. And then you can always go kind of the dark humor route. So lean into the accusation with a little bit of a morbid satirical twist. And I do like that. It makes people think twice. So you can say, oh, I know I'm crazy, but you'll thank me when you're eating my freeze-dried chili and everybody else is eating squirrels.
Okay.
Or simply, I'd rather be crazy now than hungry later.
That's another good one. It really depends on how much they're pissing you off and how
Right.
much you want to really get them away from you.
Right. Exactly. So there's also, this is the high road. There is that what they call the personal responsibility argument. And this truly is the high road. There's not a very good counter for this counter argument. People usually get it. This argument kind of frames preparedness not as a fear-based reaction, but as a proactive step towards self-sufficiency and personal responsibility. So you can throw it back and say, I just don't expect the government to save me. And this statement just highlights the key principle of preparedness. It's a focus on personal capability rather than relying on external systems that can fail. Another one is just simply saying, it's a way to take care of myself and my family. That's so simple. It's a first aid kit. It's a few days supply of water. It's the portable power bank for your phone. These are just really simple, pragmatic things you can do. And when you start talking about it like that, people get it. And lastly, I would say you can come back and say it's about peace of mind. The biggest benefit of prepping is that quiet confidence that comes with knowing you have a plan. You're not worrying about what could happen because you've already taken those steps to prepare for it. This is what you were talking about, Chris. This is like you're just a walking risk matrix. I've already thought about that thing, and it just gives me peace of mind.
And it certainly is designed to do that. That's what being prepared is knowing how you're going to act, what you're going to use, and being able to overcome those small little curveballs. It's not
Mm-hmm.
an instant all at one, you know, I spent $150,000 and got a fully loaded bunker with everything I could possibly need. Is it, or is that what the average person needs? How are you different?
Right.
Maybe you're lactose intolerant and everything is powdered milk and eggs. You're just not gonna have fun in your apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
There is also one, kind of a couple others, but having a pragmatic and calm comeback, that can be the super effective comeback because it's quiet confidence. It puts the burden of proof on their lack of logic, not your preparation. As an example, this would be, oh, you're crazy. Well, I hope you're right and I'm wrong, but if I'm right, I won't have to be worried about it. And this also goes into a theological and philosophical gamble. It's called Pascal's wager. And what it was is it's safer to believe in God and be wrong than not believe and be wrong. It's the same thing with preparing for a disaster. It is safer to be prepared and it never comes than you need something to get through it and you don't have it.
Right. Absolutely.
I think the probably one of the most concise arguments there was in the movie Alien versus Predator when they're just getting down into the temple at the bottom of the Antarctic pit or whatever you want to call it, and one of the security team charges a gun and puts it into her holster, and one of the others says, "You have a gun?" And she just turns to her and says, "Yeah, it's kind of like a condom. If I need it, I'm going to be glad I have it."
I always, when they go into that big, like the ice pit thing in that movie, I always want to just assume that that's some like dilapidated version of Superman's ice fortress.
Okay.
Like, I just want that to be Superman's ice fortress. That he just hasn't been taking care of it, like it's just sort of run down.
It's the basement that he forgot that he
it's
had.
the basement he forgot. It's Superman's ice fortress basement. Yeah, exactly.
Makes sense. Another "you're crazy" counter argument would be kind of the insurance policy argument. So this is one of the most effective ways that you can really explain preparedness. And the way to do it is to frame it as an insurance policy. It's about mitigating risk for common everyday events, not just major disasters. So, well, I don't plan to get into a car wreck, but I wear my seatbelt. Or you have homeowners insurance, not because you expect your house to burn down, but it's so that you're not ruined if it does. It's the same concept as Pascal's wager and as the calm and pragmatic comeback. You don't have to defend yourself if you're putting the burden of proof on somebody else. It's like having a fire extinguisher in the kitchen. You buy it for a small grease fire, not a citywide inferno, and that makes a ton of sense to me. I'm prepping for what is on my threat matrix, not what's on yours. And in a crisis, the government is often the first and last resort for people who haven't prepared.
Right. Every time.
Unfortunately, history is filled with examples of government failures in emergency response that have left citizens in dire situations. And it's not just isolated incidents. You look at the systemic breakdown that happens and highlight those limits of large scale bureaucratic systems in the face of chaos. And I know we do talk about this one a lot, but let's go over some kind of real world examples. And AC, I'll let you take this one away, but let's start with the big one that everybody knows.
Yeah, Katrina, right? We always talk about that. This is kind of, I know you talk about this a lot with just the emergency management background, but if you think about Hurricane Katrina, it's probably the most famous, or maybe one of the most famous modern examples of just complete and utter failure of government emergency response. And it's something cool that you can point at. And people say, oh, I'll go to the FEMA camp, or I'll just wait for the government to take care of me. Dude, that storm was just a natural disaster, but the ensuing chaos and the loss of life were largely a result of the failed government response. It failed at every level, and there's papers written about it. There's coursework on it now. Between the delayed evacuation of all these people to just these crazy logistical failures from federal agencies, including FEMA, it was just criticized for being slow and disorganized. It was very counterproductive. It's just I've got some just tons of very personal stories because I know a lot of people that were down in the area when that happened, from, you know, the local police stealing people's generators to disarming citizens just on the street because of martial law and things like that. So Katrina is one of those ones in fairly recent history in the last 20 years that we can point to and say, man, that really was a systemic breakdown of government response at every level. And I just don't want to participate in that. If something like that happens in my area, I just don't want to participate.
That's about as simple, short, and sweet as it can be, because if they would have had the advanced warning, more people would have evacuated. It wouldn't have been as big of a problem. If they would have had the key sites set up with supplies and water and dry blankets, it wouldn't have been as big of a problem. If they would have organized better for shuttling people around, they had an entire fleet of city buses that were not flooded out and could make it through the floodwaters, and they never used them to transport people.
Right. And when they finally did, they told people to go to the convention center, and that just wasn't safe. It was underwater or whatever. So then they tried to pick everybody up in those same stupid buses and then take them all the way out to the Superdome or whatever. It was a logistical failure. And yeah, if you're truly prepared, you know when to go, and you've got the resources to stay if you can just choose not to participate in the next Katrina.
And just as tragic, but a bit less known, is the 2003 European heat wave. Do you remember anything about
Oh,
this one, AC?
yeah, sure. I think in general, Europeans just aren't really as prepared as us. And I apologize if we have European listeners. I know we do, but they're just not like us. They just don't have the prep closet as much, I think.
Well, and the European continent in general is farther north in latitude than much of the US, as well as it has a more stable climate. because of how the Atlantic Ocean feeds into Europe and going into the Mediterranean Sea. There's less fluctuation in polar vortex cycles that give us all kinds of crazy weather, give us heat domes and all sorts of stuff like that. But back in 2003, there was a heat wave in France and it killed an estimated like 15,000 people because of heat related deaths.
Holy crap.
And that was just in a few weeks. The biggest part was the failure to acknowledge that it was a crisis. The government was out on their summer holiday and they were slow to recognize the severity of the situation. Um, a lot of government officials initially downplayed the rising death toll and just kind of refused to mobilize a coordinated response. And they were dismissing warnings from doctors and emergency services. There was almost zero public communication about it. So there was a significant delay in issuing public health warnings and advice on how to stay safe, how to stay cool. Unfortunately, a lot of those victims were elderly people that were living alone, and they are the ones that are particularly vulnerable. They're also the ones that are sitting watching TV all day. So if you put out an emergency broadcast, they're going to see it. They never did. And resource management was just terrible. Hospitals, morgues, they quickly got overwhelmed. There was a severe shortage of staff. The government just failed to call for a national mobilization until it was already on the tail end of that heat dome, and it killed 15,000 plus people in France alone.
That's crazy. It's just nuts to think about that those are real life examples you can point to that happened within our lifetime that were really, really bad. And if you were unprepared and if you were waiting for the government to save you, you could have been one of those 15,000 people. The other one I think about is the Haiti earthquake. That was more recent, I think, than either one of those, wasn't it?
Yeah, Haiti was 2010 or 2010.
Yeah,
2010,
maybe
yeah.
maybe it's 2010. And that's just a reminder of what happens when a country's infrastructure is completely destroyed and the government just can't function. I mean, they never really came back after that, right? And there was this massive international relief effort. They're like right there. They're off. You can throw a rock from Florida and hit them, but it just was such an ineffective international relief effort because of this lack of coordination, and thousands of people died in the rubble. It was just all kinds of stuff from that lack of central command. The Haitian government just didn't have the ability to respond. There were logistical bottlenecks, right? The airports, seaports were totally destroyed or they were overwhelmed. And then there was this breakdown of the social contract. You had gangs that just showed up and took over, and they would take the supplies that were meant for people that needed them and they would start to sell them. I mean, it was crazy. So yeah, if you are prepared and anything like the one of these three things happen, uh then you just don't have to participate in them.
And I know with Haiti in particular, after the earthquake, the government was so inundated with its own continuity of operations that this massive international aid package was put together through volunteer efforts, American Red Cross, even Xbox. Microsoft had something
That's
on their
right.
Xbox network where you could donate from your credit card.
Yeah, that's right.
Super great, cool. But the government of Haiti was so overwhelmed they couldn't accept anything. So we started taking shipping containers full of medical supplies, full of bottled water, full of bedding and emergency tents and all sorts of stuff, and just dropping it on the beaches instead of the seaports because the seaports are gone. So we just dropped it on the beaches and left them unlocked. There was an interview I read a few years ago from somebody who he was there and he was part of one of those gangs. He said it was easier to go and take things from other people than it was to go down and walk the bottles of water up the sand.
That's just crazy. That's nuts. That's that breakdown of that that social and societal contract.
And there are still unopened containers. They had
That's
almost
crazy to think
unlimited
about.
supplies, and it's easier to take it from somebody else because I don't want to walk my ass down the sand. Are you kidding me?
That's nuts.
It happens though. And really when we're framing our preparedness as an insurance policy, it is a powerful argument that resonates with anyone who's ever paid a premium or been in an accident or had a house fire or anything like that. It moves that conversation away from survivalist stereotypes and towards those common sense financial and personal responsibilities. And if you break somebody's train of thought on calling you crazy for prepping, they will start to think of it as, oh shit, maybe I am the crazy one.
Yeah, exactly. That's such a great way to put it. I really like the real world examples and framing the argument, the counter argument, as it's simply an insurance policy. Now, you can be overinsured and you can be underinsured. So I get where the crazy comes from, right? Because if you're worried about if you're worried about the home break-in and you're the guy who's overinsured because you've got 100 rifles, okay, I get that. Maybe you're a little overinsured, sure. But framing the whole argument as an insurance policy, it just makes so much sense to me, and I think it makes sense to everybody who's just a responsible adult, you know? And those examples that we just gave, those are just a few that we can think of in our lifetime. Think about like the Mount Mazama eruption, which created Crater Lake and spread ash all over, I don't know, like 2/3 of the country, or the Carrington event that they say we're due for, which was a coronal mass ejection, natural EMP type thing that just destroyed all of the electrical infrastructure that existed at the time, or even the Tunguska event that was probably a massive asteroid, but we don't really know. Like, can you imagine if any of those things happen today with 8.062 billion people on the planet? Like, it would just be chaos. So I really like the insurance argument because, just like prepping, an insurance policy isn't about hoping for disaster, like you said. It's about being prepared for one. People buy car insurance not because they just want to go out and get in a wreck, but because they understand the financial ruin a wreck could cause without it. The same way people buy the fire extinguisher, not because they expect their house to burn down, but because they understand that a very small fire can turn into a catastrophic fire in seconds. So prepping is kind of the same way. It's not about hoping for societal collapse. It's about building a shield against common and everyday misfortunes like the loss of a job, or regional power outages, or the severe storm that closes the roads for a few days. The things you buy and the skills you learn are designed to mitigate risk and give you that peace of mind. And it's simply about figuring out which of these arguments will work on that person calling you the crazy doomsday prepper. And I'll tell you a personal story. This happened to me literally just the other day. I had my first brownout. I've never had that before. I've had blackouts, right? The power goes out. I have never had a brownout. And so,
And what's the difference there, AC? What did you experience?
right, so this is crazy. So in the house, the I was in the bathroom and the lights go out. I'm like, well, okay, it's a power outage. And I walk out into the front room and my TV is blinking on and off really, really fast. And half of the lights in the house are still on and half of the outlets aren't. So electronics, the sensitive electronics, are just going crazy. And I immediately ran to the garage and got my multimeter. And to me, it just seemed like a weird voltage issue. And my outlets, that your home outlet is normally, somewhere around 120 volts. My outlets were 65 volts.
Weird.
Super weird. So I immediately went and threw the main breaker that comes in from the street. That's the first thing, just threw it. Like, because I thought originally it might be me. And I still at the time did. I threw the breaker and I go, I wonder if there's something like wrong with the house because half the outlets worked and half of them didn't. That's not a normal thing. So our local Facebook group for all the people that kind of live on the same hill as me, people started to say the same things on there. They're like, hey, is anybody else experiencing this weird stuff? And there were a lot of people that this is 20, 30 minutes into this event, and they're just posting going, my my alarm system is just chirping like crazy and my TV keeps flashing. What do I do? Like people that just weren't thinking pragmatically about it. And the power company eventually said that it was a bullshit excuse, but basically that the power lines were in like forest fire mode and they were very sensitive and something blew at the substation. I forget what the name of it. I forget what they called it, but some, you know, some made up power company word, some part blew. But me, I'm prepared, right? I've got a whole backup system, generators and batteries and inverters and all this kind of stuff. It was nearly 100 degrees out. So I go turn it on, air conditioning's running. But you've got people on this Facebook group. They're like, hey, I'm at work. I'm not home. My dogs are in the house. How hot is it getting? Like you could just see the chaos. And I immediately reached out to the neighbors that I know well, that they know that I'm a crazy prepper. And I'm like, you guys okay? What do you need from me? What can I do to help? Do you need a cooling center? Because I got one built already. But you just saw the chaos that ensued from a very simple brownout, but just seeing the way different people deal with it. And now that we're talking about this, I think about this kind of thing on a larger scale, and it does kind of freak me out because the people like you and I are just, our frame of mind is just different when it comes to these kinds of events.
It really is. And I think probably the best argument that we can give is simply framing if somebody calls you crazy or if they're a skeptic, you kind of frame it like prepping is a buffer against the unexpected. So thinking of a preparedness plan as a buffer fund for your life. I know a lot of people have kind of that savings account for unexpected expenses. A lot of people, I think it was 70 plus percent of people during the pandemic could not come up with $400 without going into credit card debt. But having things like a side savings account that you don't touch unless it's an emergency or a medical emergency or a sudden unexpected car repair. My wife and I, we keep a separate savings account and don't really touch it. It's labeled as insurance claims. And that way, if we had to file a claim on one of the cars or on the house, we can go into that and not worry about, do we have enough to eat this week?
It's your premium. It's your insurance premium money.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
we just sit there and we're waiting for something to happen, hoping it doesn't. But if it does, we've got it covered without denigrating our quality of life while it's being fixed. A prepper's stockpile is an extension of that idea. It's just for physical goods and skills. So, a food supply, a first aid kit, a way to heat or cool your home, those are just practical assets that protect you when your normal supply chain is disrupted, whether it's food, water, AC in your case, your normal supply chain of power was interrupted.
Right. Yeah. And that's what it is. When you frame it that way, you're not the crazy doomsday prepper. You're just simply like a prudent, responsible individual. So, you're someone who understands that modern life is convenient, but it is also very, very fragile. And that is what I learned like just last week. So, you're simply taking control of those variables. So you're not left at the mercy of the variables that you just can't control.
And if all else fails, if you wear a hat all the time, like I do, you can just line that with tinfoil. And when they call you crazy, just show them the inside of your hat and be like,
Oh yeah, there it is. Yeah, I like that. Kind of like the secret tinfoil hat. Like no one knows that it's actually tinfoil on the inside.
bingo.
Yeah,
Yes.
And dude, tinfoil was like on my dollar preps list. Like you can do anything with tinfoil. It's actually pretty genius. You got a little tinfoil in the hat, man. You can cook on that. You can make an electrical insulator like a wire if you need to if you need to jump a battery or something. All kinds of stuff. So yeah, having tinfoil up under the hat, that's actually a really good idea.
You can also sweat your ass off in it because that's going to get very hot very
That's
quickly.
right. I didn't think about that. Tinfoil is not breathable. So maybe it's something else. Maybe it's like a lining of the shoes or tinfoil socks or something, maybe.
Steamed brain cells for dinner. Hmm.
It's very lectory. The nice fava bean.
There is a stigma with being a prepper, and it's an unnecessary one that gets a lot of kind of hate for no good reason. And online groups, they can, if you go online, if you go into Reddit or X or Facebook and look for groups, you're going to find what you're looking for. If you want validation, you're going to find validation. If you want somebody to tell you you're crazy, you're going to find it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this kind of wraps it up for me, but I would like you to go watch Alien Nation, and I want to know what the gun is that the bad alien guy used at the beginning, because I think it was like a South African street sweeper or one of those things. It was a shotgun, but it was a magazine fed shotgun, and he swapped it out with a uh like a big drum mag, and they were just like going through 3 cars.
If it was in the 80s and it was a mag-fed shotgun with probably no stock and a shortened barrel, it was a street sweeper.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. You got to check it out. Yeah, it was awesome because they're taking cover behind the car and he's taking gunfire, and then the dude swaps out magazines, and there's obviously like some crazy slug in there or something, and they just start plowing through the cars.
I promise to check it out.
Go check it out. It's kind of weird. I mean, thinking about it now that was a late 80s movie, but there is a lot of social commentary. I think it really does have some there's some prepperness about the movie that I think you'll appreciate. And then it became, in the late 80s or early 90s, it became it was a series. There was like a 2-year, 3-year series based on the movie that was like a Fox thing.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I might have to check that out
check it
sooner
out.
than later. But
Watch Alien Nation if you can. Anyway,
I do want to continue this because I think this is really interesting. What do you say next week we discuss some of the more psychological things with how to build your group effectively?
I would like that. I would love to hear from people if they like this kind of episode, because I really do like digging into the psychological aspect of some of this, because I think a lot of podcasts just don't. I think a lot of people aren't talking about it, and some of the very good feedback I have heard from our listeners is that we do try to tackle topics that people don't. So I would like to know. Let us know if you liked if you like digging into some of the psychological aspect of this. We'll do that next week. If you don't, we'll do, I don't know, the best penny preps or something.
Okay, I'm down with that.
All right.
So if you have commentary or if you want us to continue kind of the psychological side of prepping, uh, definitely send us an email, stakeholderprepping@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook, send us a message there. We do get back pretty quick. And as always, until next week, remember, you are your own stakeholder. We'll see you then.